Welcome back, pro wrestling fans. Welcome back, IWC, to Chaos Corner here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel, for story time. The story time telling art form presented by the G.O.C. This is part 2. I just finished up a 35-minute show, part 1 of my night at the Garden, February 20th, 1978. It was an unbelievable story. This is part 2, and it's by the Worldwide Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion at the time, Bob Backlund. So we're going to jump right into it, fans. We're going to do part 2 here for Bob Backlund. Thanks for being here. Much love and respect and coming back on Groundhog Day on Friday. Have a great weekend. Grab another cup of coffee, a snack. Hang out here on Chaos Corner. Follow me on all the social media platforms. We're going to jump right back into it. This is what you get here on this channel. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, live to tape. I'm live. I'm taping it at the same time. Ah, you guys get the idea, and I didn't even say fuck at that time. Wait, I just said it. My apologies. I don't have to cuss. We're going to jump right back into it. So kick back and relax. And as I said, hit the like button, subscribe, share this out. Let's get to that 1,000 subscribers. We're 10 away. 500,000 views, 2,500 videos. I'll say that to say this because I tell it like it is. If you're not here, I don't know what the heck you're doing. We're going to jump right back into it. Here we go, fans. I arrived safely in New York City around 6 o'clock and parked in a parking lot on 48th Street. I grabbed my gym bag out of the trunk, took a deep breath, and began the 14-block walk through Midtown Manhattan down to Madison Square Garden. It was a pretty nice evening for February in New York City, and I took my time walking through the streets, passing the crowds of people leaving work that day, inhaling the ever-present smell of roasting nuts and pretzels being sold by the street vendors. Began to get butterflies in my stomach. I had arrived in New York City, the heartbeat of the world, and was about to become the newest hero. As I got closer to the Garden, I was recognized by a few fans on the way to the matches. "Good luck tonight, Bob." A group of them yelled and waved to me from the opposite corner of the street. "Bobby! Bobby! Bobby!" A group of them chanted, pumping their fists in the air. "Graham's gonna kick your ass, Backlund!" Someone else yelled. Suddenly, a couple of breathless fans caught up to me on the sidewalk. "Do you think you could take Billy Graham?" one of them asked. "Don't let him get you into that bear hug. And don't let him cheat you out of it. Remember what he tried to do to Mascaras, Mil Mascaras." "I'll do my best," I said to them, smiling to myself and giving out high fives and handshakes before peeling off to 35th Street. I stood there for a moment and looked up at a giant marquee lit up in front of the Garden across from the Pennsylvania Hotel. "Tonight, wrestling. Graham versus Backlund. Sold out." There it was, my name in lights in Midtown Manhattan, on the marquee of the most important arena in the world. I had become and come a long way from the farms fields of Princeton, Minnesota, from my life as a young derelict and a near high school dropout, from sleeping in the trunk of my car with a baseball bat, eating tuna out of a can. This was my moment, and I resolved to make it count. I jogged to the side entrance of the Garden, slid in the door, took the elevator to the main floor, and walked into the dressing room assigned to the baby faces. There I shook hands with the chief, who was neither a chief nor even an Indian, but actually an Italian guy named Joe Scarpa, Tony Gurria, Peter Maivia, and a few other people, and then tossed my bag onto the bench in one corner and began to change into my wrestling gear. Although news of the title change had spread among the boys, no one said anything to me, which reinforced my suspicion that it wasn't a popular choice in the dressing room. There were guys in that dressing room like Strongbow and Gurria, who had been the Worldwide Wrestling Federation for a long, long time, and must have felt badly about being passed over for a run with the title. But as I stood there changing, I reminded myself that Vince Sr. had faith in me, and that all of the people he might have chosen for this role, he had chosen me, and he had done so for sound reasons. He had a long track record of success, and it was not for me to second-guess him. I promised myself as I stood there changing into my black trunks and black wrestling boots that I would work hard to win the hearts and minds of the fans, the boys, and the front office. I would be champion they would all be happy to have at the top of the card. The dressing rooms at the Gardens were nothing fancy. They didn't let us use the Rangers or the Knicks dressing rooms. So we were in the auxiliary rooms on either side of the great hallway that led to the ramp into the middle of the Garden. They were just large rooms with a few lockers, some folding chairs, some benches, an attached room with showers, toilets, and sinks. The faces and the heels had separate dressing rooms on opposite sides of the hallway to keep up appearances. Hello, kayfabe was alive. Now everybody's in a bromance. Bell time was scheduled for 8:30. This would also be the first time that kids from 8 to 14 years old would be allowed to be at the Garden for a wrestling show. How about that for useless tidbits of factual information that you learn here on Chaos Corner? Before then, no one under 14 was admitted for wrestling. But that night, the era of the All-American boy would begin, and with it, the era of cheering kids began as well. Take that to the bank. Vince Sr. truly did think of everything. After I finished changing, I left the dressing room, went down the hallway out to the big open area of the end of the arena where they housed the animals during the circus. It was a large, very large room, and there was nobody there. So I stretched and limbered up and did some exercises. Billy and I were scheduled to go off late in the card that night. I think it was scheduled to be the 6th or 7th match. So I had plenty of time to wait and burn off more nervous energy. As the time for our match drew near, I definitely felt the butterflies. Eventually, word came that Vince Sr. wanted to see me. And that's when I got the goose pimples all over my body. I returned to the dressing room area, and Vince mentioned to me in the men's room where Billy was waiting, Vince Sr. brought us together, rifling the ever-present stack of quarters in his hands. I bet you didn't know that. He pulled his glasses down to the end of his nose, and I looked up in both of his eyes. Well, this is it, Billy. Bobby's going over tonight. I want you guys to work around the bear hug and wait until the time is right. When it is, Bobby, you get behind Billy, pick him up, and really hold him up there. Carry him around, and then give him the atomic knee drop. But make sure to drop him close to the ropes. Billy, you're going to put your foot on the top rope, but the referee isn't going to see it. And he's going to make the 3 count. And that will be it. In professional wrestling rules, ordinary getting a foot on the ropes would be cause for the ref to stop it and break up the pin, stop the count. The finish was intentionally designed to be a mirror image of the way Graham had been booked to win the title over San Martino in Baltimore. That night, the referee hadn't seen Billy's feet on the ropes in the corner of the ring when he used them to get extra leverage to pin San Martino for the title. Tonight, the referee wouldn't see Billy's foot on the ropes to save him from the 3 count that caused him to lose the belt. Wrestling promoters did love irony. Billy nodded somberly and said nothing. He had the championship belt draped over his massive shoulder, and I could tell he was disappointed at being asked to surrender it, even though he had known for almost a year that the day was coming. I think Billy held out some hope until the very end that his great performances and surprising drawing power would change Senior's mind. There was little doubt that Billy had wrestled some fantastic matches, given some great interviews, and over the past few months, I've been witness to the way the fans had reacted to him. Some people loved him, a lot more hated him. But there was no one who was an agnostic about, there was nothing, or who was, wait, hold on. There was no one who was agnostic about superstar Billy Graham. I corrected myself. Relax. When you get that kind of rise out of the fans, you know that your character has gotten over. It had been a great recipe for business that had lasted nearly 10 months, tenfold longer than any heel had ever carried Vince's world title in the history of the promotion to that point. That was the extent of the conversation. Vince gave me a little wink and a nod, and before I knew it, he was gone. Billy retreated to the heel's dressing room without saying anything, either to me or Vince Sr. I headed back to my spot out in the holding area. Vince had booked the finish to the match that way because he didn't want to destroy Graham's heat with the fans. By allowing Billy to get pinned with his foot on the ropes, Billy could claim in his post-match interviews that he was robbed. We didn't want the title win to be a fluke. That would have weakened my title win, like I said earlier in the first part of this show, which needed to be strong to put me over with the people. So it was important that I dominated a whole lot of match before the pin. But we also wanted the finish to look like an upset. That might not happen again in a rematch, with the foot on the ropes finish provided. 2 months of rematches ended in a steel cage blow-off in April were already booked for the Garden on Vince's calendar and storyboard. He had high hopes to draw huge sellout crowds to pay off that storyline. So it was critical that we delivered just the right touch with the booked finish. So I would come out of the match with a decisive victory, but Billy would come out still looking like a strong champion who had just been upset. That would be the key to drawing well for the rematches. Back out in the hallway, I did some final pre-match stretching and got mentally set to go out to the ring. At the appointed time, we were summoned and my manager, the golden boy, Arnold Skolin, came to my side and walked me down the hallway. I had wrestled several times in the Garden by this point, but I was grateful to have Arnold at my side that night because the nerves were definitely getting the best of me. We turned down the runway, past Vince Sr., who winked at me again as we went by, and then through the curtain out into the arena. As soon as we came into view, the people just started cheering wildly. I had goose pimples all over my body, shivers racing up my spine. There were 22,000 people out there that night in the Garden. There wasn't an empty seat in the place, which was a tribute to Superstar's ability to draw as a champion, but also a tribute to the booking that had been done to get people interested in seeing my match with him. I remember thinking that you could have fit the entire population of Princeton into the Garden 10 times over. No words could ever really do justice of the feeling of the vibrations and the energy from the people roaring for you as you stand out there in the middle of the greatest arena in the world, about to wrestle for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Championship. It is something that I'll never forget. As I climbed up the steps and into the ring, the emotion of people showered down on me. I remember thinking that life really couldn't get any better than that moment. It just doesn't get any higher. I stood there jumping around and trying to stay loose and recognized that this was everybody's dream in the business, to be in the position that I was in at the very moment. And then suddenly the moment passed as the roar of the crowd turned to a chorus of boos. And I knew instinctively that Billy was making his way down to the ring. I looked over at him as he climbed through the steps alongside his manager, Ernie Roth, known as the Grand Wizard of Wrestling. Billy's face was blank and emotionless. Quite a change from the usual. I could tell he was really struggling with all of this. The bell tolled several times to bring the noise level in the arena ring down as ring announcer Howard Finkel stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening. It is for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship. One fall with a 1 hour time limit. The bell rang as the crowd cheered, and I felt the hair on my back of my neck to stand up. My heart was pounding in my throat. People I didn't even know were giving me thumbs up from the crowd, or nodding and smiling and pumping their fists. All around the ring, flashbulbs popped as photographers angled for their pre-match shots. First, I would like to introduce the respective managers. In a corner to my left, here is the Grand Wizard of Wrestling, Ernie Roth, his identity hidden by his green turban, wraparound sunglasses, and colorful bejeweled cape, spread his arms out and soaked in the chorus of boos. Roth had the worst set of crooked and yellow teeth you have ever seen, the product of decades of chain smoking. Don't do that, fans. And he showed every one of them to the fans as he gestured defiantly to the crowd and then pointing admirably at the gold championship belt around Graham's waist. And in the opposite corner, the golden boy, Arnold Skolin. Arnie, standing beside me in his trademark dark jacket and tie, smelled of the cigars he had smoked earlier in the day while playing Jim Rummy with the front office guys. He gave a little wave and smiled at the crowd, which roared in its approval. For the 11 years that Bruno held the World Championship, Skolin had served as San Martino's manager. Now he stood beside me as mine, and that commonality was not lost on the crowd. Kind of like Paul Heyman from Brock Lesnar to Roman Reigns. Just 30 years earlier. 40 years earlier. During my build-up to this night, Bruno and I had never appeared together on television or in an interview. We had never wrestled together in a tag team match. I was certainly not positioned as Bruno's protege, which would have been an easy way to get me over with the fans, but I was standing here next to Arnold Skolin, and it suddenly occurred to me that such an overt gesture wasn't necessary. I was only other wrestler to be represented by Bruno's manager, but I would not start my reign in Bruno's shadow. These are points well taken by Backlund and gets you into the mind of Bob Backlund, who a lot of people think is nuttier than a portalette at a peanut convention right now. You guys get it, right? A smart guy. Smart to the business. Come on, if this doesn't tell you, I don't know what the heck does. I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. The bell tolled again several times as even louder roar from the crowd rained down upon us from the upper decks. I thrust my arms up into the air in a gesture of greeting and then shielded my eyes from the glare of the lights as I looked around the crowd in the arena. They were packed to the rafters, up to the last rows in the nosebleed sections. How about that, Madison Square Garden? Get better than that? 22,000? Another 4, 5, 6,000 in the felt form? As I jumped up and down to stay loose, I looked across the ring at Billy, who still wore a blank look on his face. I wondered what was going through his mind as he stood there in the ring, or at the end of his days in the spotlight. I wondered if he was regretting that brief talk we had at the YMCA in Fargo, North Dakota, and thinking out about how ironic it was that I would be ending his reign as champion when he had been the man who had ushered me into the business. And his opponent from Paradise Valley, Arizona, weighing 278 pounds, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Champion, Superstar Billy Graham. Graham pulled his t-shirt over his head and gave a couple of little jumps in place with the title belt around his waist before slowly unsnapping it, carefully folding the straps inside and handing it to the referee, who held it aloft for the crowd to see. Graham was careful not to look at the belt for too long to give away what was about to happen, but I could tell that if he could have, he would have hung on to that moment forever. Flashbulbs sparkled all around the seating bowls and upper decks. The garden was buzzing with electricity and nervous energy as the roar of the crowd subsided slightly, and the fans, nearly all of whom had been standing for the introductions, began to take their seats. Arnold Skolin put his arm around me in the corner, leaned closely into my right ear, and spoke exactly 4 words to me. "They're all yours, kid." Graham and I stepped out of the corners and into the center of the ring for the last-minute instructions from the referee. It was showtime! The bell rang and the crowd buzzed with the anticipation as Billy and I circled each other in the middle of the ring. Billy immediately caught me in a reverse bear hug and squeezed until his triceps rippled. I worked into an escape by slipping my arms through and then reversed the hold. And Billy's reached for the corner at a break. The fans booing heartily. I took the cue, and instead of breaking, deadlifted Billy's 275 pounds into the air and placed them on my back in the center of the ring as the crowd roared in approval. Playing his role perfectly, referee Terry Terranova forced a clean break, admonished me, and pushed me into the neutral corner, claiming that Graham had reached the ropes and I had failed to break cleanly. I argued and gestured at the referee, and a cascade of boos descended from every corner of the garden as Graham played to the crowd that I had pulled on his tights. In unison, the crowd began to chant an obscenity at Graham, and he jawed with the ringsiders as I jumped up and down in the ring and pumped my fist to the rally of the fans. We had the crowd in less than a minute into the match. We teased a headlock into a near fall as Billy threw me into the ropes. I leaped over his backdrop attempt and caught him in his sunset roll-up. The referee counted to 2, and Graham escaped into the ropes again. Again, the referee pushed me back away from Graham, and again the boos descended on Graham. This time, Graham caught me in a full Nelson, and we played off that for a short while. I sold Graham's great strength until I eventually worked my leg into a kick-up escape, and Graham complained to the referee and gestured to the fans that I had oil on my body. Once again, a crescendo of boos rained down on Graham. Although Graham had been popular with a certain segment of fans at the Garden, on this night, it was clear that the fans were solidly behind the underdog kid. Vince Sr.'s plan worked again. We locked up again, and Graham caught me in a headlock and clinched down on it and jawed at the fans some more. Eventually, I threw him to the ropes. He came off the ropes with a head of steam and shoulder blocked me down to the canvas, ran through to the other side, and attempted another shoulder block. I ducked behind him, pushed him onto the ropes, and brought him back into a victory roll without the bridge. And the referee again counted to 2 for a near fall. The fans were screaming as they sweated the counts. On a television broadcast that night on Madison Square Garden Cablevision, the announcer, Vince McMahon Jr., piece of shit, observed that there's a certain electricity here in the Madison Square Garden. I'm just saying as a person, not what he contributed to the business. You guys get that, right? Who am I to judge anybody, but where there's smoke, there's fire. I applied a reverse chinlock on Graham to give him a blow and a chance to consider our next series of moves. When he indicated that he was ready, he gouged my eyes to break the hold, got to his feet, and body slammed me to the canvas. When he went for a second body slam, I blocked him and rolled him up into a small package. By design, the referee was out of position and took an eternity to get the position to begin the toll at the count. When Graham kicked out at 2 3/4 count, the crowd groaned. Recognized that had the referee been in position, that would have been a 3 count. 3. The energy was in the building. I spit on my hands, rubbed them together, and beckoned Graham back toward the center of the ring. He put up his hands and begged off, and the crowd booed him deafeningly. It was time to transition the momentum. We locked up again. I swung Graham into the ropes and threw a drop kick. Graham held onto the ropes, and I missed him and crashed down to the canvas on my left shoulder. Graham began to kick and stomp and pound me with forearm blows and elbow smashes. Bang! I crawled around the ring selling his power as he grabbed me by the hair, threw me into the ropes, and caught me on the rebound, and he hoisted me up into his signature finisher, the bear hug. And he cinched up his 22 python-like arms around me. On a television broadcast, Junior was selling Graham's finisher to the tens of thousands of people watching on television. There it is, the superstar bear hug. Another successful title defense as Graham begins to squeeze. I said successful there. You suffer and succotash. Successful. A little imitation there by the G.O.C. But then after a beat of silence with the crowd roaring their support, I used an old amateur move and put pressure on the outside of Graham's elbows to weaken his grip. McMahon recognized the move immediately and called it. Backlund is hanging in there. He has his elbows hooked in an effort to take some leverage away from Superstar and trying to find a measure of escape where so many men have not. We then intensely turned to the television camera and I went to ringside, forcing my arms inside his arms as he maintained the bear hug, and Graham beautifully sold the escape, slowly separating his clasped fingers as I applied my leverage against his arms until I broke the hold and took him over with a hip toss. The people cheered approvingly. Stand by, fans. We're only 23 minutes in here on part 2. My night at the W.W.F. Madison Square Gardens, February 20th, 1978. I gotta have some more espresso. It's early! Thank you guys for sticking with me on this one. It's a great read. This is a fun read. I dropped to the canvas and sold a back injury to give proper credit to the impact of Billy's finisher. Billy rushed me and I tried to give him a double axe handle, but he grabbed the bear hug again. And this time I went limp for a couple of seconds to keep the fans on the edge of their seats, and then pushed back on Billy's head and worked back to the inside. Backlund knows all the pressure points Junior observed on the telecast. Having worked my arms to the inside, I reversed the hold and hoisted Billy up into a bear hug, cinched it up, and applied the pressure. Graham yelled something. It was nearly impossible to hear anything over the crowd. Maintaining the bear hug, I dropped Billy down, shoulders first to the canvas, and got a 2 count before he pulled my hair in a desperate attempt to break up the pin. The fans were in a frenzy. So we repeated the move again, and again he pulled my hair to escape being pinned. Acting on the adrenaline coursing through my body, I deadlifted Graham from the canvas back up into a bear hug, but Graham stuck a finger in my eye to break the hold. The old eye gouge, I love it. One of my favorite maneuvers, along with a boot to the head or a steel chair. We both staggered for a moment and with perfect timing, Vince on the television broadcast anticipated the finish. At Madison Square Garden here tonight, he's a long way from North Dakota where he won the NCAA collegiate title. I threw Graham into the ropes and applied the abdominal stretch. Really sunk it in and stretched Graham. The decibel level in the building was off the charts. And Graham and I both recognized that at the point. That even though the match was only about 13 minutes old, we weren't likely to get the crowd any higher than they were at the moment. Let this sink in. Take out your notebook. Pay attention. Take notes. The referee gestured at him, and Graham shook his head wildly from side to side to indicate to the referee that he was not going to concede the match. I poured on the pressure. We both listened for another moment, and then recognized where the crowd's energy was. Graham tapped me on the head to indicate that it was time to go home. Are you paying attention yet? Is anybody listening? McFly! He grabbed my hair and hoisted me over in a hip toss. Every time you think you have Graham, he comes up with something, McMahon lamented on television. As Graham staggered around the ring, I snuck behind him, waited just long enough for the fans to comprehend what I was about to do, and then I hoisted him onto my shoulder for the atomic knee drop. Wait a minute, Bob Backlund has superstar Billy Graham in the air. McMahon shouted excitedly on the broadcast. The fans had seen me pin every opponent I had wrestled at the Garden with this very move. They were all now on their feet, jumping up and down, waving their arms, as I carried Graham all the way across the ring to the opposite corner. The one thing going through my mind at the time was to be sure to drop him close enough to the ropes so he can get his foot across the bottom rope. It's called the ring awareness, fans. There may not be an escape for Graham, McMahon yelled. I ran Billy out just past the middle of the ring and then smashed the base of his spine across my knee. Scared a rat's off cheesecake on that? Did I get too close to the camera? Make onions cry? All right, I get it. I understand. There may not be an escape for Graham, McMahon yelled. I ran Billy out just past in the middle of the ring. As I said, the spine across the knee, the base of the spine. He's in the middle of the ring, atomic knee drop, down to the canvas. Billy had landed in precisely the right spot. Backlund covers Graham. 1, 2, 3. As one, the Garden crowd sprang to their feet. Arms in the air and bedlam ensued. The fans jumped up and down, throwing programs and cups in the air in celebration. Down in the ring, Graham still lay prone on the canvas with his foot perfectly draped across the bottom rope. He yelled at the referee and pointed at his leg, but the referee hadn't seen it as I delivered the fatal blow and then the fatal 3 count from the other side of Graham's body. The celebration was on. Bob Backlund has won the World Wrestling Federation Championship. A dream come true, shouted McMahon as the bell rang, and the referee paraded me around and around the ring in circles with my arm raised in a token of victory. Wow. I got goosebumps right now myself. I remember this like yesterday. I walked over to the side of the ring and yelled, "We did it! Yo, Adrian!" No, Backlund didn't yell that. Sylvester Stallone did. Rocky Balboa, the movie. To the ringside fans, they were celebrating right along with me. There was jubilation in the Garden as the microphone lowered from the Garden ceiling and announcer Howard Finkel was preparing to make it official. I stood in the ring. Ladies and gentlemen, the time of the fall, 14 minutes, 51 seconds. The winner and new Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Champion, Bob Backlund. I stood in the ring and celebrated with the fans until I was summoned to return to the dressing room area. There I shook hands with a smiling Vince McMahon Sr., who met me just inside the curtain. Great job, Bobby. Well done, said Sr. Vince was a man of few words, but he was smiling, and I could tell that he was pleased with how the crowd was reacting to the transition that had played out. From there, I sought Billy out in the Heels dressing room. shook his hand and thanked him for giving me and the fans a great match. Billy clapped a big paw behind my neck and offered his congratulations. I knew we would meet again in many rematches, both at the Garden and around the Horn, so this wasn't a goodbye. The boys in the dressing room offered their polite congratulations, but I could tell I would now have to prove myself to a dressing room full of guys who had been passed over for the role and had grown accustomed to having Bruno in the driver's seat. I resolved again to work to earn their respect. I showered, got dressed, carefully placed the W.W.W.F title belt into my gym bag, and headed over and out the side door at the Garden and off onto the street for a long trip back to Connecticut. We close out this chapter here. An unbelievable read, part 2. We're going to close out with a quote from Howard Finkel. My night at the Garden, February 20th, 1978. Bob Backlund wins the Worldwide Wrestling Federation heavyweight title over superstar Billy Graham. Again, don't forget, I'm repeating, we're half an hour in here. Go back and check out part 1. It was about 35 minutes. This right here will be about 33 minutes, so a little over an hour of an unbelievable story. I can't thank you guys enough. The Garden was electric. The night Bob won the belt, the energy in the Garden was just amazing. I would say that the buzz in the Garden that night was electric. It was an atmosphere that was just off the charts compared to anything we had experienced there in the recent past. Bob had been accepted by the fans at that point, and the people were fully behind him. There was a small pocket of people that were still behind Billy. But don't kid yourself, the building was solidly behind Bob. I actually didn't know the finish of the match before it happened, so I was on the edge of my seat like everyone else. But when Bob picked Billy up for the atomic knee drop, everyone knew that was coming, because that move had been built up so much, both in previous matches at the Garden and on television. And when he dropped him and jumped on top of him and the referee counted 1, 2, 3, that building just blew up. I mean, the place was literally shaking. Quote, Howard Finkel. Again, this is just one in a very thick book on story time here. An unbelievable night. Legendary nights, as I always say. Again, given to me personally by Bob for Paradise that night in the Hercules Hernandez Memorial Tournament when Bob was my guest in ring. So again, I can't thank you guys enough for being here. This was, again, like we always do here on Chaos Corner. For as much as everything is planned out, and we know we're always going to push out and put out content here on the channel, it's usually spontaneous energy, motivation, passion, spur of the moment. That's what you get here, fans. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it. Come on back. I'll be back. You never know. Keep those notifications on. Buy me a cup of coffee. I won't be offended. Thanks again, guys. Much love and respect.